This podcast is sponsored by askROI.com.
There's the political side of it, and then there's the real story.
There's a lot to unpack right there. Wasn't quite the interview I thought that was going to be.
There's a reason for it.
This will be officially my favorite podcast I've ever done.
I want to start off with asking you a question that I think the average person doesn't really want to ask a person as smart as you. And I happen to be pretty intensely into AI, but I wondered if you could explain to everybody, like in the most layman terms, what is an algorithm? Like people throw that around all the time. The algorithm's open, I'm gonna share the algorithm we use. It's somewhat confusing to the average person to understand, like, is there a layman's version of what an algorithm is?
Yeah, an algorithm is just a very precise sequence of instructions for accomplishing some task. For example, we all learned the addition and multiplication algorithms in primary school, right? You know how to add numbers. A slightly fancier algorithm is how to play tic-tac-toe, right? How do you win at tic-tac-toe? There's a set of things that you should do, and if you follow those instructions, you will always win. Now, humans, we don't tell the instructions that we give each other, we don't call them algorithms, because they can be fuzzy. Like a cooking recipe is not really an algorithm because you have to fill in the details. But computers are completely dumb, so you have to specify everything down to the last detail, and that's when you call it an algorithm.
And so a person writing an algorithm is basically saying a series of instructions, so my friends tell me, because sometimes in my Instagram, I have like I'll search for, say, a particular type of plane, and eventually I have sort of this unlimited amounts of planes that are that come into my feed because I liked one of them or I saw one of them. So I'm assuming that they make an algorithm that says, if this guy likes this, send him more of this. Is that the basic idea?
That is the basic idea. That is not the algorithm, however, because this is actually where things get interesting. What, for example, Instagram or Twitter or every social network has an algorithm that chooses what to show you, but that algorithm is a learning algorithm. So what is actually written down by us AI types is how to learn from your data what it is that you like. And then it has a model of you. You're interested in planes, you're interested in this and that, you're not interested in whatever. And then what it does is the algorithm produces a ranking of the posts with the ones that are more likely to be interesting to you at the top. But the model can change over time, as it can and does, and should, changes over time as it learns more about you and gets to know you better.
Is that AI learning, meaning that is the model using AI to learn about you, or what's the computer language that's using to, what is it doing? Like, where does it reside in the universe? Like, you hear about NVIDIA N100s and Blackwell coming and all the things that are happening around AI. And I say this as a guy who's a capital allocator who owns 3 data centers where they're putting in NVIDIA servers, in one of them in Michigan, and a guy who owns askROI that's like a ChatGPT on steroids. And the people who work with me made it, and they're really smart people, but I have no idea, where does it reside in the universe, this quote algorithm that's learning about my behavior? Or is that just too complicated of a question?
No, so there's really two different things here, even down to the actual chips and data centers. There's the learning and there's the inference. So for example, these days you actually have chips specialized for learning. Learning is an algorithm, a learning algorithm. That's what I do research on for a living. What it does is it takes in the input and the output that you desire. So for example, to take a different example, let's say you want to learn to do medical diagnosis. What the learning algorithm does is it's a program that sits on the computer, but it takes in pairs of the symptoms of the patient and the diagnosis. And what it produces is another algorithm that will then turn the symptoms of new patients into new diagnosis. Or for example, it will produce recommendations for you, right? So the thing that slightly takes a little bit of time to get your head around is that a machine learning algorithm is really an algorithm that produces another algorithm. That algorithm is then an ordinary computer program that does inference. It sits on a server somewhere. So for example, Google, right? Every time you do a search, it runs its algorithm to produce the search results for you online. But offline, right, in some other data center, and again, the demands on this are a bit different for the learning case. It actually has an algorithm that is scarfing up all sorts of data. For example, like what did I click on, among the search results, because that kind of gives you a hint as to what it is that I'm interested in. And from those, it produces the search algorithm that then produces results for you and me.
The speed of which the rapid amount of change is happening, this is Moore's law, right, when we talked about Intel and chips, that seems to have been blown away now. It seems to be that we went from, we can get call waiting in a touch tone phone to things that are just not even possible. So sort of where are we going from here? Because what I'm seeing now, I mean, just in our own program, askROI, I'm blown away by what it can do. I literally just use it all the time. It's our own program where our askROI product, we can put in a question and it just routes it intelligently to whatever large language model we think is the best one. So we're making algorithms about large language models which we think have the best rating on whether math or science or answers or press releases or papers or what. It seems like this is sort of exponentially growing on each other, and I'm curious as to what you think the next 5 years look like, if you can even predict out that far.
There are things that we can predict. There are others that we can't. Now, AI is certainly progressing very fast, but I don't think it's in any danger of getting out of control a la Terminator. That is a fun science fiction scenario for science fiction movies, but I think a lot of people in the world today are a little confused about that coming to pass. There's just nothing in current AI, either in the capability or in the motivations, that would make that happen. AIs are not humans. They don't have emotions, they don't have desires, they don't have consciousness, they don't want to take power. It's just not like that, right? Again, that's part of what I try to demystify in the master algorithm and then satirically in 2040. The bigger danger of something getting out of control is not the AI getting out of control, it's the humans using the AI getting out of control. The problem always has been and will continue to be with us. What we should worry about is the things that we will get up to with AI, not the AI itself deciding to do something nauseous, because it just doesn't have that capability.
So that's a debunked issue. It's humans that'll do this. It's not the computers that'll do it.
Yeah, as a rule of thumb, I would advise people every time you see an AI, see through the AI to the people who actually produced it. The AI is an instrument of those people, and it's the motivations and the intentions of those people that you really should be worried about. In two ways, at least. One is that some people really are bad actors, right? They have bad intentions. Criminals will use AI, or even, someone might just use AI to manipulate you. That is a real danger. The other danger, which is really a lot of what 2040 in particular is about, is that people will just screw up, right? We have more and more power in our hands, and AI is certainly a really powerful technology, and we're only seeing the beginnings of it, which, on the good side, it means we can do better things than ever, but on the bad side, it just means we can screw up on a scale never seen before as well.
Do you think that AI is the fourth industrial revolution? Do you think it's as big of a deal as the telephone, the internet, the car?
I think AI is potentially an even bigger deal than all of those. Now, this is a big statement to make, right? But as you know, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, famously said that AI is bigger than fire or the wheel.
I've said this before, AI is one of the most profound things we are working on humanity, as humanity. It's more profound than fire or electricity or any of the other bigger things we have worked on. It has tremendous positive sides to it, but it has real negative consequences.
And a lot of people were like, oh, come on. But think about it this way, right? The Industrial Revolution, I think, is actually a good comparison. What the Industrial Revolution did was it automated muscle work, right?
Sure.
We are now no longer dependent on just our own energy to do things. What AI promises to do is to automate intellectual work. AI is the automation of intelligence. Now, the big thing about humans on Earth, the novelty with us, if you will, was, higher intelligence. And now AI is going to be an even higher intelligence than that. So this is a really big deal. Now, people talk about the third, the fourth, et cetera, et cetera. I think a good way to keep things straight is the following, is that computers, information technology, the whole information revolution, information, as I said, those are all just a primitive form of AI. In the early days, they called computers electronic brains, and they really are. A computer is a brain. Now we don't think of them like that anymore because they've become banal. But really, the AI revolution began in the 1940s with the first computers. And the internet is the next step of that revolution. But where we're going is that there will be more and cheaper intelligence on Earth than ever before by orders of magnitude. And this will be a radical change economically, socially, politically, etc.
In your book, The Master Algorithm, you wrote, Homo sapiens are the only species that adopt to the world itself instead of adopting itself to the world. I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate, although I think you kind of did a little bit. But what do you? That's a pretty powerful statement. I'm curious if you could just elaborate a little bit of it. I want to get your thoughts on that.
That really is, I think, the key to understanding us and also the technology that we produce, and in particular, machine learning. If you think about it, what all living creatures do, animals, plants, whatever, is they adapt themselves to their environment. This is what evolution and natural selection is all about. Whoever adapts themselves to the environment better survives, reproduces more, etc., etc. Now, human beings are unique in that we don't just do that. We actually shape the environment to fit us. Now, there's other creatures that do a little bit of this, right? Beavers, ants, etc. But human beings just do this on a different scale. We actually create an environment that is good for us to live in. Think of a city, right? A city is an environment that was synthesized by human beings from top to bottom to be a good environment for us to live in. We can do this because we have hands, right? We have opposable thumbs, we have tools, we have language, we can organize ourselves in societies. And so instead of changing ourselves to fit the world, we change the world to fit us. Now, this is interesting from the point of view of machine learning because machine learning is really the computer version of that. And in our hands, it's the next stage in adapting the world to us, right? We've adapted the world to us quite far so far, but I think with AI, we're going to adapt it to a level that people even have a hard time imagining right now.
You know, as I said, I own an AI company, and they've made an algorithm of me, or not an avatar of me, and it's almost an exact replica. It has my voice, it has my mannerisms. In fact, you could argue right now that I could be the avatar I could not even be real. It's so complicated. And I'm wondering, like, how do you think we deal with that? I don't know if you have any conversation on the sort of the judicial or sort of higher political issues around identifying what is not me, because my staff right now can just write into a program words, my voice will say it, my body will move it, but it's not me. What's the ethical side? I mean, where do we go with that?
So this raises a lot of questions that are going to have to be resolved individually and as a society. And most of all, we are already starting to live in a different world. For example, it is no longer the case that if I see a video of you, it was necessarily you, right?
Right.
So first of all, people need to make that mental shift. I mean, these days, I could be seeing you, or, for example, it has been the case that people who were accused on something based on video evidence said, like, no, that video was a deep fake. That could happen, right? So here's one implication of this, is that the idea that photographic and video evidence and recordings are definitive evidence, that's gone away, right? It's going away. It will go away fairly completely. And a lot of people are very worried about this, and rightfully so. But you have to remember that for most of history, we didn't have photographs and videos. So this is one aspect. Another aspect is who owns your image and your likeness and what you say, right? And initially, and even now, for example, most celebrities, artists, etc., are very worried about this. I predict that what will happen, in fact, this is already starting to happen, is that if you're a celebrity, your avatars will actually be your biggest asset. you will make more of your money, for example, from people paying to interact with your avatar, more than they can, for example, with you in a movie or with you on social media, which is only just a very tiny bit of interaction. So people are going to want this. But we need, new legislation to cover these things because it doesn't exist yet. But I think at the end of the day, what this legislation will mean, a lot of people, for example, who are entertainers or celebrities or athletes, they're actually going to love the fact that you can have these avatars. Now, a third issue, and and maybe I'll stop there, is people are going to have, which you were alluding to, right? I don't know if you saw this a video clip of Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, interviewing himself. His avatar was interviewing him, and he was interviewing the avatar.
Reid AI, introduce yourself to everyone.
Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm an AI-generated version of Reid Hoffman, his digital twin.
And the thing is, think about this both as the person in the video and as the viewer. I don't, you got to distinguish the fact that it'll be very tempting for people to blur the distinction between the avatar and the real person. But you have got to be careful about that because, for example, your avatar is not you and will screw up or will say things that are different from the real one. So, for example, something that is starting to take off is like avatars of your loved ones that died. Right? You can still be with them. But actually, there was a news story about someone who did this, and then in the end, she was like, "No, that isn't really my, deceased husband. I don't think I like that at the end of the day."
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of issues surrounding this that we're going to be dealing with.
Sure. You write that programmers are like a minor god. Did I read that correctly? Do you think that the fact that they make an algorithm that they take the conclusion they're sort of a minor god, like it's godlike behavior?
Absolutely. And the thing to realize is that a program can be anything. In particular, a program can and is these days a whole world. You can create a whole world. Think of multiplayer online video games. Think of Pixar movies, right? A Pixar movie is a whole world that was created on a computer. So when to me as a computer scientist, this is one of the most amazing things, right? Is that like, my imagination is the limit. I can create a world in my mind, and then I can make it happen. I can make it happen, on the screen. Increasingly, I can make it happen in the real world with, 3D printing and whatnot. And if you think of Genesis, right, in the beginning was the word.
Yeah.
It's ironic that that could be describing computer programming. You literally write down words about what you want to happen in the world, and then the computer brings that to life.
This podcast is sponsored by askROI.com.
I can't help but ask you, I'm sure you've seen the Elon Musk stuff, and I've read about this for years, but is there any credibility that we're in a simulation?
Every teenage boy has a phase of his life where he's fascinated by the simulation. That happened to me when I was, 17 for 6 months. Because, hey, who knows, right? We could be in a simulation. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter unless you can tell. If there's a test to tell me whether we're in a simulation or not, then it matters. Otherwise, whether or not we're in a simulation is completely irrelevant. The thing about Elon Musk is that he's still a teenager in many ways, so he's still fascinated by those questions.
Yeah, I asked that because I myself find this sort of manifestation power that I seem to be able to like the fact that you're even on my program. Now, you would argue that my producer got you on this program. But you'd also argue that a few years ago I decided to go into AI, and the universe around me, of all the people around me in AI, was manifested. I don't know how to explain it, but you said there's a genesis of it. It seems like that exists, but it's too complicated for this. I asked that because you talk about this complexity monster, and I'm curious as to that complexity monster. Does it have anything to do with the idea that you're a creator when you build these algorithms, and that you open up? Is it the logic that this is sort of an Oppenheimer moment where you create something and then you regret you created it, or there's no way to put it back in the bottle? Or
The complexity monster is actually what limits us. So if you as a programmer, you're a minor god, then complexity is the devil. So I lied a little bit there when I said that my imagination is the only limit. There is another limit. The laws of physics are not a limit. I can violate the laws of physics in the worlds I create any day now, right? As you see in movies and video games. There is, however, a limit, and this is the complexity limit. The complexity limit, like I can only create things that are not too complex for, for example, because they don't require too much time and memory on the computer's part, but also that they're not so complicated that I'm not able to actually specify them. As you can imagine, in an algorithm, if I have to specify every detail, things get very complicated very quickly. And this truly is the biggest barrier to AI, is just the complexity barrier. Some people say, there's this saying that if we were so simple that we could understand ourselves, we would be so stupid that we couldn't, right? And by the way, Elon Musk's notion of the singularity, this is also, of the simulation, also related to the singularity. But
yeah, you brought up singularity. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. But this is where this is actually where both of those fall down. He says, like, the simulation, then, we're in a simulation and we create another simulation, right? Which is what we're doing with all these virtual worlds. So he says, like, it's the chances that we are actually in the bottom simulation are infinitesimal. But there's a big flaw in this argument, is that the complexity that you need to create each one of these is huge, right? So let's suppose that we are in a simulation. The next simulation that we create is going to be much smaller. Just not physically possible for it to be the same size as the original one, right? The universe is a simulation of a bazillion bits, and we are only a fraction of that. And then the next simulation will only be a small fraction of that. So actually, the chances are overwhelming that we actually are in the root simulation because of complexity.
What's the greatest scientific breakthrough we've ever had? I mean, to all knowledge and all data and anything we've ever done, what is the greatest accomplishment to date that can you pinpoint that, or is that a ridiculous question?
No, I don't think it's a ridiculous question. I think there are many good candidates. But if I had to pick one, at the end of the day, this is, great from what point of view? I want to say from the point of view of impact, of how much it changes the world. And at this point, considering the world today, you would probably say it's something like Newton's laws, right? He figured out how the physical world works, and we've been building on that ever since. So our civilization owes more to Newton's laws than to anything else. But if you fast forward to the future, I think when people look back 100 or 1,000 years from now, they will say that the biggest advance was Darwin. It's evolution, it's natural selection, it's understanding how that works. Not only because it's what made us happen, it's because I think when you read The Origin of Species, at least in my mind, one of the things that really comes across is that the stuff that he's describing there doesn't just apply to life, it applies to everything. Technology evolves, technology is subject to selection. AI, machine learning, they do that on an even faster clip. Darwin's idea actually came from economics. What he actually took was this idea from economics and ported it into biology. So I actually think when all is said and done, this idea of evolution by natural selection, in some ways it is the most important, most pervasive law of the universe, and figuring it out was the biggest advance.
So Darwin was kind of no more than an algorithm.
No, actually, so good example. Not long after The Origin of Species was published, I forget which famous person of the time said, and this is dead on, he said, like, God does not create animals and plants. He created the algorithm by which animals and plants come about. And indeed, evolution is very much an algorithm. So much so that one of the 5 main paradigms in machine learning, which I cover in the master algorithm, is precisely to automate evolution, is to do a simulation of evolution on the computer, where instead of evolving animals and plants, you evolve programs and electronic circuits and robots. These days there are robots in the world that literally were evolved by sort of like this computational version of natural selection.
I'm curious about if you could even comment, I don't know how you would, but I know you have a new book coming out, 2040, a Silicon Valley Satire. I'm curious as to your thoughts about the current presidential election. in terms of how, I don't even know how to ask the question, because there's no way I'm gonna go follow you on Twitter right now. I just want to do that. I'm in the middle of an interview. I'm gonna go follow you on Twitter. Sorry. I'm really curious about what you think the effect of algorithms and what's happening. Wow, there you are. How the presidential election is going to be affected. I've never been a conspiracy theorist guy, but it seems like a lot of the things that are conspiracy theories now come true, or at least we think they come true. And I saw this, it was a strange thing that basically Kamala Harris is going to be the nominee. Then everyone got behind that. And then all the media seemed to all turn and go, okay, this is the person. And then we see this rewriting of history. And I'm not commenting on that part of it. I'm staying out of the political side of it. I'm saying that it seems like there's a conflict between the things that happen on social media, the things that happen in these algorithms, these searches, what happens in your daily life, your own feed, and then society trying to tell you that something was different or it didn't really happen that way. And it seems like there's a conflict between one half and the other, and they're all using these algorithms against each other to say, no, that's what you said before. The digital footprint you have doesn't go away. You can see that now with people pulling up stuff that she said, the vice president said over the last 10 years. And it seems like an incredible conflict of now my own page is just full of just non-stop about the election. It's it's the most intense thing ever. And I'm curious as to whether, what your thoughts are on how it's affecting the presidential election cycle.
So 2040 is the story of a presidential election, right? That's the joke, right? It's the 2040 presidential election. And of course, it's a spoof of our current world in technology and in politics and in how the two collide. And there's plenty to satirize there. So what happens in 2040 is that one of the candidates is an AI, is a robot. Mm-hmm. It's ChatGPT runs for president. And that's the Republican candidate. On the Democratic side, it's a social media influencer who is faking to be a Lakota chief calling for the abolition of the United States, right? And then it's the struggle between them. And again, all of these themes that you touched on come up, like the difference between the reality and sort of like the world, the universe that these people are living in. They have both diverged from reality in their different ways. And then, of course, in the book, there's a reckoning where they both get, some very strong feedback from reality and bad things happen. And of course, part of the goal of the book is to be a cautionary tale. In a sense, it's a caricature of where we are now. But it's also saying to people, look, if we don't do anything, this is where we're headed, and it's not a good place. I mean,
right.
The common reaction of people who've reviewed the book so far, or a very common one, is this is really over the top and far out, but somehow it's very realistic. It seems like, so for example, right? Right now, you have a choice of voting for Trump or Kamala Harris. What actually gave me the idea of this novel, I always, I thought somebody should write a novel about Silicon Valley, the same way that Bonfire of the Vanities was about finance. But what gave me the idea was a journalist asked me, so would you vote for an AI for president? And I thought for a second, and I said, this was back in 2018, no, but if the other candidate was Trump, then yes. And the thing is, ChatGPT being elected president right now would be a terrible thing, but it's all relative. If the other candidates are bad enough, then electing a chatbot president becomes a good thing. And I would submit that we're there, right? Trump and Harris in their own ways are bad enough that maybe we would be better off with a chatbot as president. I don't know.
Yeah, we're certainly making it so not a lot of people really want to run for president. I don't know. I personally wouldn't do it. I don't know. Maybe ego-wise, people do it. It seems like a thankless job now, right? But anyways, that's a whole different conversation. I want to turn to you about the current AI that's available, and I don't know your thoughts on ChatGPT. I have a chief technology officer, and I know this is going to be out there, so I'm going to caveat to say This is the opinion of my chief technology officer and the opinion of my staff. I'm not saying that this is a factual statement. This is what they've told me. So our chief technology officer said to me that what we've made with askROI is far superior than ChatGPT. And I thought to myself, you can't really, can you possibly say that? Is that really like, that's a scary thing to say? And he explained to me why, and I've been using it, and I totally understand that. And you've seen these sort of leapfrog things happen. I remember when Ask Jeeves and Lycos and Yahoo were around, and Yahoo was the search. And then they had a chance to buy Google and they didn't buy it, and Google became like the most dominant player in search, and of course, AdSense and AdWords, AdWords became the greatest, probably capitalist, profitable item in the world, and it's probably the most profitable business ever invented in AdWords. But yet, for my own CTO to say that a program we have now is superior to ChatGPT, and he has his reasons for explaining it to me why it is, and I see that. But obviously, we're kind of a garage band, Ask AI company with, we have 40 people helping us. What's the leapfrog now? Like, what do you see happening? Like, it seems like what I saw from our own products 8 months ago is night and day today. So it's like it's not even the same program. The capabilities are absurd, and even ChatGPT is outdoing itself.
This podcast is sponsored by askROI.com.
What is on the horizon for the average consumer using or business using AI?
Well, by the way, I think it's completely plausible that I don't know what your program does, but it's completely plausible to me that it beats ChatGPT for a couple of reasons. One is that ChatGPT is a generalist system. If you build a system for some particular purpose, it's actually completely feasible that it would be a lot better at that than ChatGPT is. The other one, which is actually ironic, is you describe yourself as a garage band. OpenAI is a garage band. They have hundreds of people now, but when they produced ChatGPT, they truly were a garage band. They were, I don't know, 50 people actually doing, research and another 50 doing ancillary stuff. So this is all about garage bands. What is amazing to me and exciting and maybe also scary is that a garage band today can produce something so powerful and so advanced using the computing and data that we have.
Sure.
And I would even make a prediction to your question that there are other garage bands out there today, right now, producing stuff that's going to make ChatGPT obsolete. And the question is, what will it be? Now, what you see a lot of today from the consumer point of view is like you have this big competition to produce ChatGPT, like chatbots and variations on them, which is all well and good, but you shouldn't be under the illusion that this is going to get us to human level intelligence. Some people at OpenAI seem to have that illusion. There are very fundamental limitations that these systems have. So for example, you as an individual or a company, you want to know what these systems are good for or not. So for example, they're not reliable. If I was a company, I'd be very hesitant to put one of these chatbots in front of my customers. Like the Air Canada one who made up a refund policy and then they were forced to honor it because the judge said, look, your representative said this. It doesn't matter if it was a human or a machine. Now, I think I think it's very important to distinguish between two things. One is, with the AI technology that we have right now, ChatGPT is a perfect example, what could happen in the world, in different sectors of the economy, different things, etc. And there are 200 revolutions still waiting to happen with just the technology that we have now. And ChatGPT is just one part of the AI, waterfront. There are many others. So even if there was no more progress, that there would already be an AI revolution. But all of that is nothing compared to the real revolution, which is when we really get to human level AI. That truly will be, something. It will. I mean, let me put it this way, right? We're debating the stock market and how much of it is justified and what the contributions to growth will AI make in the short term. In the short term, it is quite possible that the contributions of AI to growth will disappoint because it's a hard problem and because of the limitations that we've been talking about. But in the long term, AI's contribution to GDP will be to quadruple it or quintuple it. Like, you can't even say exactly what the limit will be, right? It's just going to be something of an order of magnitude that I think people right now have a hard time even picturing.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, I as a guy who's an investor, you know, I've always been in the sort of, generally in the sort of dumbed down science of, I would even say drug development to some degree. There's some dumbed down science to it. We made a product that counts sponges in the body to prevent sponges from being left behind. We've had some of this basic technology stuff. But then when I got involved in AI a few years ago, when we bought this first data center, are we evolving faster than Moore's Law?
Well, in computer science, there's this saying that hardware improves exponentially, software improves linearly, and humans don't improve. And I think it's important to realize that there are these different limits. So to start at the hardware level, Moore's Law is dying. This is why NVIDIA is now bigger than Intel. Intel was the company that invented Moore's Law and kept it going for 50 years. But Moore's Law is just running out of steam. And what you have to do is parallelize. Now we just need more compute. And this is why NVIDIA is now the ruler of the roost, because they are the post-Moore's Law company, right? So there's a limit to how much compute and how much energy, for example, you can consume to do AI of other things. So on the hardware level, Moore's Law is going away, but the need for computing is not diminishing. On the contrary, it's increasing. So there's a whole set of technology and economics that happens there. Then there's the software side, where, yeah, we have all this hardware power, but now the thing that limits us in AI at this point, more than anything else, is not lack of computing power. It's that we truly don't understand how to make, more intelligent algorithms. That's a real barrier. But we're all working on that, and now there's more people than ever working on that, and more resources being poured into that because the return is very obvious. But then, even supposing that Moore's Law was going forever and we had super smart software also improving exponentially, then this is like and this is where the Ray Kurzweils of this world go like, whoa, singularity, like we're going to the moon, right? It's like, even if there were no technological barriers, there's these all other barriers that come into play. Humans, right? The technology, AI in the world can't evolve faster than human beings can evolve to adapt to it, right? Like, it just, if it doesn't sell, it doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't sell unless people do something with it that is valuable and they understand. There's the economic barriers. There's the political barriers. Like now there's all these like countries passing laws saying AI can't do this, AI must do that. So even if the technology had no limits, there would be all these limits to the speed of progress of AI that coming from all these different factors: psychological, sociological, economic, political.
So when's your book come out?
August 20th, in about 2 weeks.
Before we sign off, though, I was curious as to this evolution around compute power and the need for power to run compute. I'm biased. I'm just going to be clear with you. I own 3 data centers, the potential of about 600 megawatts, give or take 550 megawatts. Probably expand that even higher. But I'm curious as to your thoughts about, if you have any commentary on what's next for power and compute and what NVIDIA is doing with Blackwell, because it seems to be, there's an analyst at Wedbush who talks about $1 trillion CapEx cycle in AI. And if you're going to spend $1 trillion, you're going to expect something for that. And I'm curious as to what you think. And you may have already answered this, but I guess I'm going to drill down a little more on what you think the next 5 years like. If you were to say 5 years from now, NVIDIA are they still the dominant player? Is AMD on their and I'm not asking you to make a commentary on the stock. Like, this is not stock advice. I'm asking you, from compute and AI, like, who do you think the dominant players are going to be?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, the biggest barrier to the progress of AI right now in the very short term is energy. There's also chips, NVIDIA chips, but NVIDIA is ramping up with that. That is actually a very solvable problem. But the energy cost of AI is a really tough nut to crack. because you can't ramp up power production the same way that you can ramp up chip production. And the thing to remember is that computers right now are so spectacularly inefficient in energy consumption compared to the human brain. It's not even funny. We like to compare AI and human intelligence in various dimensions. Some of them humans are still ahead, some AI is ahead. But when it comes to energy consumption, your brain consumes 20 watts, which is about the power of a dim bulb. So if somebody calls you a dim bulb, that's praise. Right? That's a plus.
I'm sure I've been called that before.
There you go, right?
Yeah.
So, but to reproduce the power of your brain with a data center would take more energy than the city of New York.
It's
just
inefficient.
Orders of magnitude worse.
Yeah.
It blows your mind. And this goes back down to the semiconductors, to the chips. I mean, like a state-of-the-art NVIDIA chip is like a radiator. It spews out heat like crazy. So you need all this power to power it, and then you need all this power to cool it. That is the other problem.
Right.
And I find it kind of ironic that on the back of the big, advanced high-tech AI boom, what we see now is like these completely unsexy, old-style utility companies that or like, infrastructure companies have suddenly become very valuable because, of course, it's not enough to have the chips. You have to have the data.
I bought an old copper plant in Michigan that had the potential for 300 megawatts of power. It had 30 live. And now we're talking about billions of dollars potentially being invested in one facility to go to 300 plus megawatts to power NVIDIA chips. It is old industrial power, copper plant, smelting of copper, all the power needed to arc that copper. And now all that power is needed to run AI. It's really old is new again, right?
I'll give you an analogy, which may be good or not, but what this reminds me of is how the most valuable asset the Sears had was the real estate, and the same thing with Macy's. The real estate is worth more than the company.
Sure.
I bet you there are a lot of these old, like aluminum smelting is another one, right? Like their biggest asset is the power consumption that could be used for something else. Like, forget the aluminum. I'm going to buy you just so I can power my AI data center with your power supply.
As 1 billion% happening for sure.
Yeah.
And software on your side in terms of not chips but power software, you think it's linear?
Actually, to be fair, software actually progresses exponentially as well in some ways. So a lot of the biggest speed ups in algorithms that we have just came from people inventing smarter algorithms. So in that regard, there is in some sense a Moore's law of software, and we've been taking full advantage of it in AI, and a lot of my research has been a part of that. But that's one side. The other side that we alluded to earlier is the complexity, right? There's this complexity barrier of like the things that you're trying to build are being too complicated. And there, maybe it's even worse than linear, that like there's a barrier that we'll have a hard time getting over. In fact, the only way to get over it is with machine learning. Now, the thing to me that's exciting is that, for example, would I rather be NVIDIA or would I rather be someone, inventing new machine learning algorithms? I'd rather be the latter, which is what I am. Because in machine learning, in some ways, NVIDIA has a more predictable business, which is good. But in machine learning, you really could sit down and in one afternoon write an algorithm that makes more difference than all NVIDIA's chips ever did. For example, the algorithm that all of this power, all of these chips is going to is called backpropagation. It was invented by one guy, a psychologist in the 80s, trying to model, the children learning language. And that one algorithm, that one piece of code, if you will, is what now is powering this entire revolution.
What's it called?
Backpropagation.
Backpropagation?
Yeah, because it's about propagating errors back. You look at the errors that the systems makes. For example, I say this person has lung cancer, but they don't. And then I see what needs to be changed upstream in the system to actually make it work better. So the errors get propagated back through the layers of the neural network, and you tweak the weights to make it do better next time. This very simple idea is truly what powers LLMs. Like the entire AI revolution today stands on top of this one algorithm. In fact, the master algorithm is called the master algorithm because that is the key idea in machine learning. Is this one algorithm that powers everything.
I hope you'll come back even when your book is not on tour because that was enjoyable.
Sure.
I appreciate your feedback and being on the podcast. We'll have to check out your old book, your new book, and well, the old book is, I mean, you got endorsed by big time. I mean, hey, couldn't get any bigger than Walter Isaacson, in my opinion. I love his writing too. So we appreciate you being here, and we'll see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This podcast is sponsored by askROI.com.
You know, I'm going to explain to you real quick. We're rolling out. There's a reason for it.
So, yeah, you got it right.